we have an impressive group that contributed to this, a really nice cross-industry representation that are all interested in doing both hybrid cloud and multi-cloud kind of deployments. So just wanted to kind of share that optics with you in terms of like the folks who have been able to participate. Now, I think before we get started, I just want to kind of go down the panel. Everyone on the panel has had the opportunity to participate in the development of this. The way that we started this, we were meeting really every other week, and we first formulated a what would be the framework, what would it look like, and we did that based upon the last ONUG at NYU, and we were asking folks what were the biggest obstacles to cloud deployment, and security by far was number one. Different architectures between the enterprise and also cloud providers was another one. There was a lot of discussion around contract language and also compliance, and so that's another section. How do you mitigate lock-in? And so the way that you mitigate it is first to identify it, so we identified lock-ins. And then IT staff and organization skill sets. Are we kind of ready for it? And then the final is kind of recommendations. So we kind of based the framework upon the input from the previous ONUG community, and that kind of drove us towards developing. And so every meeting we had was on a particular topic in the outline. So without any further ado, let's kind of go down the path. Joe, I know you were here earlier today, but just a quick hello, just in case there are new folks.
So I'm Joe Farrell. I work for General Electric, and I'm based out of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Jin Sun?
Well, I'm Jin Sun. Hello.
Push up.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm Jin Sun. I work for FedEx from Memphis, Tennessee. If you have never been to Memphis, we got the best barbecue in the world. There's no doubt, hands down. And I run our global network and communication services organization for FedEx.
Pablo Espinoza with Intuit, Global Network Services for the Product Infrastructure Division here at Intuit.
Hi, I'm Larry Abrahams. I'm part of the Cloud Technology Group at Citi. I'm sitting in for Harman and Ali, who participated in this.
I'm Jim Unian. I do research and strategy for UBS.
Yeah, I'm Carlos Matos. I work for Fidelity Investments in the Network Architecture Group. Last statement from Dean about the barbecue. I'm from Dallas, Texas, so I don't know about that.
But cute.
That's a fight.
All right, so our first discussions were about security. And so we thought, okay, well, how are we all thinking about security in this hybrid cloud environment? And then the first thing that we started to go through were, you have to kind of think about different applications and how control and security controls different applications have. So Joe contributed this idea around security tiers. So you want to talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So whenever we started on the journey, we've been at the journey maybe 2 or 3 years in the context of going to public cloud, so a really emphasis on public. And I know this is about hybrid, but it'll resonate. We're an infrastructure organization, but we're trying to motivate the application teams to really understand what they do. So we wanted to categorize our applications based on what you can see here in terms of risk, and largely it's risk for intellectual property. So we originally categorized into 3 categories. Low risk, sort of the answer there, and we even have a little algorithm. Low risk, go to public cloud, and we activated Amazon. And you can see that it's non-sensitive data and so on. If I skip over the middle pieces, high risk, it's intellectual property. We're a big research organization as well. We have lots of patents. That's going to stay in our data centers. Then the middle category is where most of the meat is for our applications, and it's probably the hardest. We have a couple different categories. We started with one and we added one in the context of we're still going to go to public cloud, have to intimately know what that application does and what the data is. And we sort of categorize it as medium. And then this medium plus came out that we're trying to get rid of the brand after I shared with you.
Yeah.
It's export control. So we're a big consumer of Amazon, and Amazon has GovCloud. I was talking to somebody in the hallway about that a little while ago, and we're marching down the path of GovCloud from Amazon in terms of export control kinds of data. So we classified our applications, and every conversation we have with our business or application teams is to drive them down this path to understand their data. Versus historically they said, hey, you're the infrastructure guys that's going to be in the data center. I don't have to worry about it. So that's kind of the overarching framework.
Yeah.
That makes any sense?
Yeah, and that resonated with everybody in the group. So as soon as Joe kind of offered that, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, we do that. We do that," as well. So we wanted to share that as a best practice when you're going through this hybrid cloud stuff, is to start thinking about how do you categorize your applications, which is a daunting thing as well. They're like some groups, some companies have obviously thousands of applications. I'm so sorry, I'm giving my back to this whole group over here. Let me move my chair. I just realized that. So then we talked about the security sectors, and then we started to focus around what is a framework, what does the architecture look like? And so we thought about segmenting control. What do you control? What does the cloud provider control? And it seemed clear that everyone was moving towards or deploying this kind of architecture, where it's enterprise cloud broker as a concept, and then also cloud provider. And I'm going to let Jim Yunan speak to this.
Thanks. Well, basically, what we're talking about here in the context of a cloud broker is a layer of abstraction between a cloud provider and what you're running in-house. I don't know how many of you have seen
Microsoft's Azure Stack and their mechanism by which you can deploy between enterprise and cloud seamlessly, but for the most part, that's not possible today. In the context of what we're looking at here, we want to be able to extend our network and make that transition as seamless as possible.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I think in this architecture too, we identified a couple of key things. One was IPv6. Because a lot of the kind of Internet of Things requirements for sensor connections are going to be kind of residing within the cloud. And so we knew that some were getting requests for massively large numbers of IP addresses. So we felt, okay, IPv6 should be a major part of this. Encrypting traffic across should also be a key part of this. The cloud broker is also another really important part of here for another reason. That's really where the first inspection is. So it's deep packet inspection, scrubbing, and trying to mitigate as much exploits that can kind of come back into the enterprise as possible. And the other key point about that is that is really becoming the edge of where the data center resides. So we're kind of pushing services out of our own private facilities into that co-location facility. Anybody else want to add to that?
I mean, this is a huge tenet of our network, and it ultimately, I think, will be our core. We're not saying those words yet, but you kind of have your core that sits around your data centers today. As we move down the path of moving more and more to the cloud, whenever that scale tips that most of the apps are in the cloud, that really becomes your core. But what I'm seeing, I think I said it in the last session, is we easily have 5 clouds that we're going to connect to within the next 6 months. So you're going to have applications traversing this control domain, and it's going to become probably the most important aspect of our network.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, Carlos?
Yeah, I think in that one is the interesting part of, as part of the cloud broker, basically connectivity to a cloud, is that everybody is trying to do basically a dedicated connectivity. So it kind of goes through the whole stack, right? I mean, there's some elements in there that go through layer 1 through layer 3, basically in terms of, and even layer 4 at the OSI, layering system. And there are other elements that are higher layer than that, which is more about the provision and orchestration and stuff like that. And we can talk about that one. The interesting thing is that everybody seems to agree that the best way to actually do this is create dedicated access so that you can control better how you're moving in there, especially because how complex it is between all these different cloud providers, that each of them has their different routing mechanisms and routing ways to actually get to them. And at the same time, some of these cloud brokers, just the connectivity portion of them, are offering now ways to connect to them via layer 2 or layer 3 or different ways, and how to actually also distribute the routes to you so that you know that all the traffic has to go through that. So is that dedicated is really what you're seeing in terms of best practices right now, and it can allow you to create all kind of security around that area.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think,
I think when you look at a large corporation like GE, Fidelity, or FedEx, the reason drive us to have a hybrid cloud is because we have a legacy of 30 or 40 year build up in our data center. Our own data center will never get away. I mean, they will be there forever. That's our legacy and our treasure. And we also are forced by the marketplace, by our business and by the global forces, market forces, to purchase and use additional capacity and global scale. The problem is, once we buy all those kind of capacity from different players, if we cannot manage all those capacities, plus our internal capacity as a holistic, continuous capacity, we're sub-optimizing this and we're losing economic of scale. And the model will not work.
Yeah. Very good. Great, June. We have just one last little slide here, and it's about the other function of a cloud broker. Maybe it's just 2 points. One is that important thing about the cloud broker is to have as many kind of services in the cloud broker as you're comfortable with, so that you mitigate the amount of traffic that's constantly coming into the core, deep part of your data center. So if you can kind of like do DNS there, that's a good example. So it kind of comes in, it gets kind of naming services, and it doesn't have to go deep down into your core. That's important. Also, most are saying we are owning, we do the configuration, we do the management of all those devices in the cloud broker as well. Now also, since there is non-continuity, architectural discontinuity, there we go, between enterprise and the cloud provider, the cloud brokers are also providing a translational service. Carlos, translational services.
So this is why I kind of mentioned that you have basically one piece of a connectivity, one piece of a puzzle is really just the connectivity, which vendor is going to provide you, that access to all the different cloud providers and which way, whether it's just a circuit or it's just a co-location. But now in terms of basically the cloud broker capability, think about it, you have all these different cloud vendors out there. You have Azure, you have AWS, you have Google, and you name it, Rackspace, all the things that you have in there. And the reality is that you want to give your customers basically capability to provision in all of them if you're going to allow them, or at least have stages where you provision through any of those vendors, right? Now, if you have to learn to actually provision in each of them, it's kind of difficult. The other part of that is also that you don't have the same security, isolation, multi-tenancy rules that you have from your internal software-defined data center to external. So this idea with possible cloud brokers that you have in there is also these companies that are giving you a capability to provision and have like a common northbound API where you're basically provisioning through the same look and feel to multiple different things on the back end, right? So there's, and it's a tricky proposition right now because, I mean, if you go with one of them, really right now, you have some locked in, okay? There's no real standards to have like an open way to actually do for everything. So you have vendors like Red Hat with CloudForms that you can go and do that, or you could have Scalar, you could have Clicker that was bought by Cisco, you could have CSE Agility, which was Service Mesh before. So you have all these different vendors that you can go through all of them to say, oh, achieve the same thing. Provision either my internal private cloud through them or go to the public and achieve that. But the reality is that whichever you pick, you're going to get some locked in on it. And we want to actually, suggest that we can get like an open standard to do things in that space.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, just kind of adding to that, I mean, I think that's the fundamental challenge today, right? I mean, out of curiosity, for those in the room, how many of you have, in your internal sort of on-prem environments, how many of you have a 100% mature orchestration model in your data centers today? Okay. How many of you are actually exploring public cloud services? Very few. Okay. So I think the challenge there for us, and I think as we evolve into this, right, is, what we're dealing with here is the sort of the movement of dealing with a fully mature orchestration model within your own on-prem data centers, right? Which in many of us, I don't even think we're there yet. And then trying to determine how do you future-proof that when you're looking at public cloud providers, right? It's a fundamental challenge, I agree, and I think that is where I think this working group really comes in, is trying to figure out how do we adopt a standard to that, because you essentially need an interoperability with that. You need integration with your existing orchestration tools, whether they're commercial off-the-shelf orchestration tools or homegrown, whatever they might be. But the reality is in many cases, you're still going to have to operate as a service to your customers. Whether you're spinning up, an L4 service, or whether you're running DNS, or whether you're doing key rotation, doesn't matter. It's still a service, right? So this is definitely a big focus, I think, for us right now, trying to figure out how do we unlock this from an industry perspective as well.
And this, for all the folks, if you are from the cloud services provider players, this is a huge unaddressed market opportunity for you guys. Look at us, FedEx. Our business has a lot of seasonality, and Intuit has a huge seasonality as well. What we need is somebody who cracks the code, allow us to have easy provision, deprovisioning for 3 months period, because I need burst capacity for the holiday season, and he needs for the April tax season. And we only need it for 3 months, but you can charge us for that, but I don't want to commit for 12 months. If somebody can solve me that problem, you got a lot of market traction for that.
Yeah. Very good.
I'd add one thing from the city perspective. We'd agree with everything that was said. And it's at the point where we wonder if we have to create our own internal APIs and data models and standards, because we don't know that we're ever going to see this kind of a standard come from the industry. And to all of your points, we can't kind of live without that. We have to abstract away the various mechanisms by which we deploy on-prem and off-prem. Otherwise, we won't be able to take advantage of the efficiencies.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to shift away from kind of slides and have kind of discussions. And please do vote during these, and we'll go back to these voting results during the talk. Now, also, this framework is actually a paper that was just published about 5 minutes ago. It's on the ONUG website, so you can download it at your will. So there was a section in there about lock-in identifiers. So what gets you really locked in where it's hard to kind of get out? So Pablo, I'm going to kind of give you that one to kick off the fireside chat.
Lock-in identifiers. So I think this is still an area for us specifically that is evolving. We're learning. It's a journey for us. I think if you step back and you look at the fundamental problem that you're trying to solve from a cloud perspective, being able to really look at it from that angle and essentially have the right criteria that you would actually challenge your provider from, right? I think that's one aspect of it. But I think this is where the involvement of a cloud broker also comes in, right? Because they have the various use cases that are being seen in the industry. They will also help unlock some of those things. But essentially, at the end of the day, the lock-in exists today for sure. It is a very, very tough thing. I mean, I certainly don't have an answer of how you would unlock that, but I do know that it has to be industry-driven from the community. And essentially, just like we've done with many of our vendors and our products, through ONUG and throughout the years, I think now the shift is how do we apply that same type of framework to the public space, the public providers as well. So
Yeah.
And one of the things I think about when I think about lock-in, and we had a healthy discussion about this as we were developing this, is we were focused around the network, and in the context of lock-in, probably the least of my worries. Most of my worries is whenever you go to Amazon, you consume RDS. Nobody else does that the way they do it, right? So then you're there. So it really goes deeper than what we're talking about in the context of our thinking. And the way we want to deploy is, we want some redundancy. So we want to deploy it at Azure and Amazon. Well, they have different services, different microservices, and so on. So we can abstract some of that stuff on our edge in the context of our business process, SSO, AD, DNS, those kinds of things. We're even writing some of our own APIs for our applications. But it's a deep, deep discussion, because once you're there and you consume those services, you're there. And
Yeah.
that's what I worry about.
Yeah, yeah, the whole workload creation,
Yes.
Part, and also even the data as well, and how do you kind of move the data out of there as well?
Yeah, and being
Data
there is not a
gravity.
bad thing until you want to come out.
Yeah. Larry, did you want
Yeah, I was just going to say, to your point, where we think about, is there a lowest common denominator that we can abstract, but then a governance model, if someone has a use case for something like RDS or a specific service from a specific hybrid provider, we need a way to not prevent that, but we need a way to govern it so that the business risks and implications are understood.
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of locked-in, you see always, I mean, as we progress and start creating compliance and policies, a number of things internally, right? You'll see a lot of people say, well, you know what, we cannot live with only one vendor and have that locked in of a cloud. So we're going to have two different clouds that we keep things, and we can have either, some presence in both of them in the case that something goes wrong with the other one. Like if it was your extension of a data center, if you will. The problem with that one is really that type of thing that that even with the broker system that you have today, you will also want to have like an extension of all the different solutions, SDN solutions you have internally. But if they don't interoperate, they don't work together, they don't partner with actually that broker, then you have to recreate everything on the cloud.
Yeah.
So then you end up building yet another infrastructure in each of the clouds that you actually put in there as part of your solution. And it's difficult. So one idea will be to get more, or to see more integration between overlays or between any SDN vendors also with these brokers, or trying to identify their own, solution that they can deploy in the native AWS, native Google, native Azure, not through OpenStack. OpenStack is easy, right? I mean, if you have an OpenStack cloud, but nobody has like an OpenStack on top of AWS.
Right.
So you need to get that SDN vendors also participate in this thing actively to be part of the network brokers, if you will. I'm sorry, the cloud brokers.
Okay. All right, great. We're going to switch around a little bit, now, and it talks about kind of multi-cloud. So actually, Gene, this is going to go to you. So during the discussions, we were also talking about lack of different cloud providers in different theaters around the world. And the problem that creates. You want to talk a little bit to that point?
Well, the issue when you look at it, when we first talk about cloud service provider, I think most of the folks in this room care about two things. One, the infrastructure as a service, as well as platform as a service. We really don't care too much about software as a service, right? Let's just focus on infrastructure as a service. When we talk about, I think vast majority of folks in this room focus, immediately think about, AWS or Google or, all those folks are dominant players in the US, North America theater. But when you look at AWS or even Google, they are very lacking in the Asia Pacific or even in the European theaters for us. And for a global corporation like us, our customers are global. And we need to extend our computing in every single theater where we do business at. So we are forced to look at different players. We go into Europe or Asia. The stronger cloud service providers were actually local telcos. And those telcos are much more dominating in those theaters than Google, Amazon's are. I understand from Google, Amazon, one was because every single country, when you're operating certain sets of infrastructure as a service, those kind of things, you run into lots of privacy law, government regulation, and so forth. You really need to be a strong local players to thrive in those kind of compliance or regulatory environment. So we are forced to deal with different players in different continents. That's the reality we're facing. So we don't know where this is going because the dominant player like Amazon or Google still largely being viewed as a U.S. company. And that's good thing and that's bad thing. Depends on which angle you look at it. So we are probably facing for foreseeable future different players, different dominant players in different large geographic location.
I agree. And GE's revenue probably is greater than 50% outside the U.S. now. Yet the lion's share of our applications are in the U.S. But that doesn't really work. So if you're sitting in Japan and you're traversing all the water to get back to a data center in the U.S. or to Amazon East or West or whatever, your performance is going to be lacking. So we certainly have faced into that. What I think that's going to drive, if we're expeditious enough, if we could go build instantiations of OpenStack for IaaS in those locales, because there's plenty of data center providers, then maybe that negates the need to use an Amazon in that locale, right? So it all comes down to the speed at which we can execute.
Yeah, so there's another talk about different type of cloud service providers now we talk about. So when you think about Amazon, as well as Google, those cloud service providers are very prescriptive for their entire stack. You shall use RDS if you want to use Amazon.
Right.
You got to use their entire stack. When you go into other theater, kind of like, or go to telcos, because there are different business models being offered. Of course, they can help you piece together entire stack they can offer to you, just like Amazon. Of course, that's one economic model. They also offer same colo or hybrid type. Kind of like they offer database layer or OS layer or all the way to middleware layer. I mean, it's all customizable in those regions. So it becomes kind of good or bad, depends on which side you are on, when you look at this.
Agree. Yeah.
Gene, just a quick question. In those environments, are you predominantly leasing, just extending your data centers into those colos because the complexity, if you thought about dealing with 5 different Amazons in the world, that complexity alone would be prohibitive for you to go to that model, right?
Right.
So is that how you do it? Is it predominantly a leased model where you're just extending your data center to their prem? Is that the way you do it?
No, actually, what we are doing, I hope I'm not spilling the beans on this, but I think it offers some kind of, playbook for you guys to think about it. You really, when you have an enterprise going to a global theater, you really have to think about 3 partitions of your strategy. The first is look at a standard vanilla play of cloud providers. Kind of like prescriptive. I just buy virtual machines from them. And I will use their orchestration or management tool. You don't want to have 5 different Amazon in that space, right? So that's one extreme. Another extreme is basic colo. It's I buy capacity, space, and power from you guys. You cage everything for me. I just drop my equipment and everything else there. You provide heating, cooling, power, space, as well as network connectivity for me. That's it. That's another extreme. Then there's a hybrid in the middle. Basically, kind of like open space, and the hardware is not multi-tenant, and those telco, those kind of providers, they will actually manage the OS layer as well as database layer for you. But everything on top, we can manage ourselves. So there is some kind of meet in the middle, kind of like what you talk about. You build your own OpenStack, right, on top of what they can offer.
And there's plenty of suppliers that will sell to you by the drink, right? So, and they'll manage your OS and they'll do all those kinds of things at some degree of scale. Right. So, I mean, I think it's an opportunity for the industry. It's an opportunity for us to define it. And I think Amazon does a great job, but they're not the silver bullet for everything.
Yeah. So it's like a scale from all the way cage, colo, all the way to AWS model. So there's a scale depends on how far you want to dial.
Yeah. Okay. I want to go to a lightning round, of a couple of quick topics, and really around the whole compliance, contract language, stuff like that. So. Gene, I'm going to start with you again, sorry. But it's like, why should large consumers of cloud services engage professional negotiators?
Yeah, I look at a negotiator. I hate to disagree with you, but I will not use the term negotiator. I will use the term advisor.
Okay.
That may be more appropriate because, most of us as a large corporation, when you go into those kind of cloud services contract, it's not your outsource contract, it's different. Because the key issue here compared to outsource contract, you are losing your custodial data control into those kind of cloud services provider. That brings a lot of compliance issue, or potentially, depends on what kind of model you use, build your own model to the colo situation. There may be for your enterprise licensing implication as well. Think about that. For your pricing model with Oracle, with all those companies. We are technologists. We are not necessarily the best risk manager or attorneys there is. So, from both corporate risk management as well as us as IT executives for our career risk management perspective, probably it's best to have some advisors.
Yeah, great. Jim, I think you're itching to kind of say something. So go ahead. We're in the lightning round. Go ahead.
I was curious about indemnification. How has your legal teams dealt with things like indemnification? So you have a data breach, you have a security breach at a colo, at an Amazon. How has that been dealt with legally? And the reason I bring it up, I mentioned Microsoft before. For the first time I've ever heard a company say, we offer unlimited indemnity. So you have a Wall Street day where on the Journal it says company X's data was breached via Amazon, and that's a bad trading day for your stock. That's a bad day for everybody. How have you guys addressed that? What are your thoughts on that? Have you tackled that?
I mean, Microsoft's much more flexible, surprisingly, than I expected them to be. So, using those kinds of words, we haven't had that level of success with Amazon.
Vast majority of the company we dealt with, they want to have a very small cap on how much they are all willing to do that. Because their own insurance company will not allow them to do that.
Right.
All right, so Gene mentioned something, but Pablo, I want you to expand upon it. And it's that cloud service contracts are not outsourcing contracts. Very different kind of beast. You want to talk
Yes.
about it?
Yeah, and in terms of outsourcing, kind of the terminology, I think I've had the fortunate track record in my career to manage a group that has done outsourcing the traditional way we know outsourcing, and then obviously do insourcing stuff. But when I think about a cloud provider, to some extent it is sort of outsourcing, but it's not really outsourcing a staff aug type of outsourcing model. You're outsourcing your workloads. You're outsourcing your services, your, in some cases infrastructure, but primarily services, right? So I think in that mindset, at the end of the day, that due diligence still has to apply, because you're putting essentially your data, your assets that you manage on behalf of the company into someone else's hands, right? It may not be in a staff aug perspective, but certainly in a workload. So I think those are certainly things, I think it's a different way of looking at it. I think that whole piece is evolving as well. Yeah. I think back at the old traditional telecom and carrier days where what evolved out of that were telecom brokers, right, if you will. I feel like we're kind of heading down that same direction with cloud, and who knows what it's going to evolve to. You might have an outsourcing type of model in the cloud space as well, right? Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. Larry, licensing. I think you might have even mentioned that in passing. I'm not quite sure. I thought it was a full flurry of discussion there. But what licensing issues that large consumers of cloud services should be concerned with?
Yeah, well, really all of them, right? There are some third-party software providers who have, let's just say, relatively cloud-friendly licenses, off-prem friendly licenses, and there are those who don't. And some of that is because they're competitors. Some of that is because they're happy to continue licensing as if it were on-prem and extract even more money off-prem. And in some cases, they may not even want you running their software off-prem because they have vested interest in trying to keep your franchise on-prem. Or in the case of someone like our friends in the Great Northwest, wanting to migrate you from on-prem to cloud services without getting disintermediated. So I think it is like most things, it's buyer beware. And like most things, in the transition, it's an opportunity for enterprises to look at, do I simply want to take what I'm running on-prem and forklift it? And even if I can pay that same provider off-prem, is there a better way to do it, even if it does involve potentially some lock-in with a different model with a cloud provider?
Okay, very good. Okay, I know we're running out of time. I wanted to get questions. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do that. But I'm going to have one question, and then we're going to go to like just really quick, what were the recommendations that we provided for the industry? So Joe, auditability, and I hate to have to say this word, attestation. You know,
I'm glad you're saying it and not me.
you know,
because I can't pronounce it.
it's a term that I kind of learned from doing this work at the working group. It essentially provides what's the word I'm looking for?
Evidence.
A certification, you know, that we are doing what we said we were going to be doing. You know, that has some legal binding language to it. So anyway, what kind of requirements should we get?
Yeah, just real quick in that, I mean, you know, we haven't completely cracked the code yet, and our approach is different than a traditional outsource. So in a traditional outsource, you write the language, they provide the documents on whatever monthly recurring basis that you want it, and then you both live happily in perpetuity forever. In a cloud world, you know, I think it's really on us. So the data's out there. You got to know what your data is. If you outsource to your favorite provider, you don't care. Somebody else is running your junk for less. This, we do it very application-centric, and we really put it back on ourselves. So we hold Amazon, those guys accountable, but it's very bounded, very guardrailed.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, the requirements and recommendations that we provided. So Larry, I'm going to start with you. Encryption key management and ownership. This was a really hot topic at this during the working group.
Yeah, so really quickly, you know, this is something that I think most enterprises have struggled with on-premise and have never fully automated and maybe fully gotten on top of and have governance problems with today. So obviously extending this off-prem is a big challenge for all of us. So anything that we can see from a standardization perspective would be most helpful. But I would consider this somewhat of an unsolved problem today, especially as we look to abstract it across cloud providers.
Okay, great. Joe, core foundational services that we want from cloud providers.
So for me, this is probably the most important thing that I worry about is consistency here, and there's not a lot. But things like DNS, some of those basic things that we all just kind of forget and they just kind of work, there has to be a level of consistency or an API interface to those at cloud providers. So you can think about AD, DNS, you know, NTP, those basic things that you really need. You want consistency, so you're not programming 5, 10 different ways. So there's a short list for me, but as we evolve in the space, it's a growing list. And it doesn't get down to the level of RDS because, frankly, I think that's why Amazon sells that or gives it to you, is because they want you to lock in.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Great. Yep. Gene, standard northbound orchestration APIs.
Well, that's a given. You know, if you're a startup, you don't have to worry about this. But you know, because you just rent space from Amazon, your life is good. You know, go on with it. But for us, you know, we have our own data center. We have our own private cloud, and we will keep that private cloud, you know, until I retire, at least. So, you know, we will buy additional capacity from public cloud, at least one cloud provider. So we're facing with 2 issues now: our own private cloud as well as public cloud provider. If we are unlucky, we're a global company, we'll have multiple cloud providers in different continents. So, you know, in order for us to carefully manage this, you know, if we don't have those kind of APIs to tie everything together, our staffing model just doesn't work. And we cannot have the monitoring, you know, to make sure the traffic and everything else work in this global capacity, you know, because once we extend our network and our infrastructure to the cloud service providers, that's part of our network, extended network. We need to provide QoS, provide SLA to our customers because it's on us. And without this fragmented information, provisioning, orchestration, it's just not doable. We got to have all those tied together by APIs is a way to do it.
Okay, great. Jim, standard policy definition and language between cloud and enterprise.
I think that's a hard problem on the enterprise alone, getting common semantics to policy and being able to drive that policy in the enterprise alone, let alone taking it to a cloud provider. So it would just be nice to have a common semantical language and a common policy model that allowed us to express what we all want to accomplish in common terms, and whether we have to abstract that away from the underlying deployment or not, but those are key things to enablement. And like I said, I don't think we have that in the enterprise alone, forgetting the cloud.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I'm getting the sign to wrap up. Okay, so let's do that. My apologies that we didn't have time and opportunity for questions. We're all going to be around. The cocktail reception is going to be fabulous. So we can all have discussions there. So please help me welcome or thank, my apologies, Joe and Jean and Pablo, Larry, Jim, and Carlos for working so hard over the last couple of months and putting together this framework for us. You can download this on the ONUG website and review everything we've talked about and also get to the things that we weren't able to as well. So thank you guys.